Hello, everyone, and welcome to this panel, The Magic of Love. My name is Anjelica Rufus, reference librarian at the Prospect Heights Public Library District in Illinois. I'll be moderating on this session featuring 5 fascinating books where sometimes love is all you need. I'm so excited to welcome Erin A. Craig, author of A Land So Wide from Pantheon, coming September 9th. Childhood sweethearts Greer and Ellis are trapped in the cursed village of Mistaken. When Ellis vanishes during a ritual, Greer vows to defy tradition and face the monsters outside to find him. Next, we have Ebony Ladelle, editor of You've Got a Place Here Too from Delacorte Press. This anthology, out August 12th, features 12 character-driven love stories set within historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, that explore dreams and desires. The all-star contributors include Ebony Ladelle, Elizabeth Acevedo, and Kennedy Ryan. Next, there's Annie Mare, author of Cosmic Love at the Multiverse Hair Salon from ACE. A wrong number leads hairstylist Tressa Faye to flirty texts from Mare, a gorgeous stranger in a different time. As messages jump from May to October, they try anything to merge their separate universes. Out June 3rd. Next, we have Mia Sosa, author of When Javi Dumped Mare from Putnam, coming June 24th. Javi and Mare have secretly loved each other since college, but decided to stay friends. With 6 weeks until Mare's wedding, Javi has to show her that he is finally ready to be her man. Although Javi ghosted Mare at one point for 6 years. Finally, there's Ariel Sullivan, author of Conform from Ballantine Books. In a dystopian future where the alum controls reproductive rights, Emmeline from the minor defects social class gets a procreation contract with a member of the ruling class. Meanwhile, a charming visitor of hers hints at resistance. Book 1 arrives October 14th. Okay, let's get started. First question goes to Erin. Like so many of your works, A Land So Wide is inspired by folklore, in this case, a Scottish tale. What attracts you to reworking fairy tales and folklore into their own unique stories?
I completely blame my childhood. I was one of those kids who loved to reread books over and over again, and my mom was always begging me, like, please just read something new. You've read this story, you know this story. But I was always really drawn to fairy tales and folklore as a kid. And I love that, like, they're one of the true stories where you know it as a child, you respect it as a child, you love it as a child, and then you start to read, like retelling versions of it as a young adult, and then you go and revisit it as an adult, and you can take so many different truths from the same story. Before I became a full-time author, I was a stage manager, and I did mostly operas. And I think because I would sit through these rehearsals of Puccini's greatest work and Verdi's greatest work, we tell the same stories over and over because there are such universal truths found in those. And so I think when I started kind of writing stories on my own, it was kind of natural that I fell into like the fairy tale retellings and the folklore retellings. And I love getting to explore those very simple childhood stories that we all know from multi-cultures, and getting to take all those like very core universal truths out and get to play with them in different ways and kind of put all of the familiar tropes and beloved parts that we all adore about them, kind of spin them on their heads and get to really examine what makes each story that story.
So next goes to Annie. In Cosmic Love at the Multiverse Hair Salon, the novel starts linear before it splits into 2 distinct timelines. One in Tressa Faye's present day, where Meryl is a stranger to her and is also missing, and another where it's 5 months earlier, and Meryl purposely alters her connection to Tressa Faye by meeting her in person. What methods did you use to keep track of both ever-changing timelines?
Well, for myself, I used almost no method and just was constantly confusing myself by writing and rewriting and putting everybody's narrative against each other and breaking it apart again. But for the reader, when I finally got to like those final refining drafts, like really what I was thinking about is how do I want to make the reader feel? And the thing that I kept going back to is I want the reader to feel like this is what's happening in my book is a thing that has happened to them or will happen to them. And the sense of that overwhelming feeling of like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And like, no matter what I do, the right love will come for me. And I have had experiences that have borne that out. And so that's how I started putting it these timelines back together for the reader. And so there are like lots of cues because the book is made up of the two different timelines, which are always indicated by dates because we need to know like it we have to, like my editor said, we want to get a little closer to Doctor Who timey-wimey and a little farther away from science. so so there's plenty of cues for the reader to keep track of where we are, but also the emotional journey of the characters in their different timelines is different, and the things that are happening to them are different until things start converging and more things are the same. And then as we hear from other characters in Tresife's friend group, we start to understand that this is true for all of them, that all of them, if you want to take away the idea of like magical or spiritual destiny, there is still like a universe that you exist in that is unfolding, and all the different possibilities that you've desired for yourself or thought of or worked through. And so and in order to create that feeling of these characters are for each other, will always be for each other, and will find each other. So but there are lots of like section and chapter headings as signposts through the multiverse.
I'm also a fan of Doctor Who, so thank you for that response. Mia, and when Javi dumped Mare, the timeline shifts from present day to the past every few chapters, showing readers how Mare and Javi's friendship began and what it becomes after they meet again 6 years later. How does this approach enhance the use of flashbacks, as opposed to setting the story chronologically?
Okay, so one of the questions that needs to be answered in a romance novel is, so why can't they be together now? And we learn that in this book from the first chapter. Javi is ready to declare his love to Mari, and they can't be together because Mari has shown up and she is announcing that she is engaged and about to be married in 6 weeks. And so Javi's question, which is also the reader's question, is how did we get here? And the way I wanted to accomplish that was to focus on the pivotal moments in their relationship and how they changed the trajectory of their romance. And so in order to do that, there is an immediacy, I think, to kind of the dual timeline and positioning them in those pivotal moments so that you know precisely why it is that they got here, because you can link it directly to what happened in the past. And putting it in that present tense also gives you immediacy. But the one thing that I think sometimes we forget about also is when you have a relationship that spans so long as there's this, they meet in college. You forget sometimes that these are college students. And I don't know if you remember what you were like at 18, 19 years old, but sometimes you don't make the best decisions. And so actually seeing those decisions in those moments at that age, I think kind of makes it clearer for the reader why they have found themselves where they are years later.
Thank you. Ebony, setting is significant to the plot, and you've got a place here too, such as Xavier University of Louisiana and Pharaoh Rashawn's story, Second Line, First Dance. Why is it important for readers to learn about traditions and student organizations at HBCUs?
Yeah, so just for some context, in Second Line First Dance, the main character Jordan is part of the student government, and they're putting on their annual Mardi Gras extravaganza for the alumni and everything. And so she has this sort of like enemies to lovers story with a classmate who's also in student government, Kendrick, who actually ends up educating her on the Mardi Gras Indians, and its historical context. And so I remember when I pitched like this to Farah, I asked, could you give me a Mardi Gras story and experience? Because she went to Xavier herself and she really brought it. I'm not going to spoil it. You have to read to find out. Um, but one of the things I loved about attending HBCU myself, I went to Howard, was sort of the cultural events that were happening from the student organizations across the diaspora. They would put on events and you would be able to experience, like either watch them do something or be able to experience it with them. And I think it was showing the best of their traditions. And I think for that, it's in honoring traditions, because when you honor traditions in the right way, it keeps you tethered to culture and community. It gives you a sense of pride. And I think when you're able to partake, like, I'm obviously not Caribbean, but when I was able to partake in like the Caribbean festivals or some of the events that they did, it showed like a new level of appreciation and respect. And so that's why it's important. And I think particularly for Black Americans, so much of our ancestors' traditions have been stripped from us. And so having institutions like HBCUs really, like I said, have a way to honor and preserve our history. And then having the backdrop of traditions while your experience and love story was definitely my goal.
Thank you. Ariel, reading Conform reminded me of other books with totalitarian governments such as The Handmaid's Tale and the Hunger Games series. What was your inspiration for writing a novel with a dystopian setting?
Yeah, so I started writing Conform in the middle of COVID, which I mean, we can all call like it's a very odd time for everyone. We were put through these unprecedented circumstances, and there was a lot of fear and this like really heavy loneliness that I found like both terrible, but also like wildly intriguing because in our isolation, we all fought really hard for human connection, through means much of like what we're doing right now. We all moved to like great lengths to take care of the people we love, to protect them. And this desperation for togetherness in the isolation really inspired the idea of combining these two genres. Obviously, dystopian and romance are very different. Dystopian, it's rooted in oppression and control and typically like a hopelessness, whereas romance, typically there's a happy ending. But in both of these, like the characters are like varying motivations. They fight for like against unfavorable odds, whether it's to be with who they love or to overcome some hurdle or oppression. And this like really spoke to me. And obviously we all talked about like, we all love a good romance story. We're all here for the magic of love and we all write them. And there's a reason it stood the test of time, a lot like Erin said, whether we wrap them up with technology or magic, we all really love that universal want to be loved. And so I thought, like, what was a more captivating story than to combine these two and overthrow, a totalitarian government and reignite hope than like a really, really good love story. And it's how I got here.
You. Annie, Tressa Faye believes Merle is the one for her from the moment of their first interaction. What are some of the events that reinforce this?
I was very intrigued by the idea of, and I've always been interested in multiverse and the idea of time being nonlinear and all the different scientific theories that have tried to explain some of the anomalies that we see in physics and space and time. I was a young astronaut in grade school, so I think like I never stopped being interested in this. And that came to be the explanation for something like love at first sight. So and of course, like the most important thing in a romance is for the reader to really believe that these people have earned the love that they have found with each other, that they've both like gone through personal and growth together in order to arrive at their love for each other and how they care for each other. But what if that's happening all the time, like in other like universes that are woven to our own? And that is a kind of explanation for a feeling of rightness about someone, or a feeling of coming home with someone, or a feeling that like maybe if you haven't exactly met this person before, like something inside of you recognizes them. And so I was always trying to connect this very scientific idea of how time and space works, and how and the definition of time with our very human experiences that are grounded, that we find explanations for, whether it's love at first sight or feeling as though we are like don't ever have the right timing with someone. Like we already have a language for these things, with the idea being that we're already experiencing some of the things that get described in the book. And like the book is a sort of like I wanted it to be a way that you could enter and see all of the different threads of our own lives and all of the lives that intersect with ours, and how no matter what, they end up braiding together. Meryl, who's Tressafe's love interest, is a stormwater engineer. But so that means that one of the things she's thinking about all the time is water, and the persistence of water, and the memory of water. And of course, Indigenous cultures like have relatives and loved ones in bodies of water, in rivers, like and understand that in fact that bodies of water do have like memory, and carry with them all the places they've been, carry with them all the places all the ways that they are struggling, because we're trying to conform them into like one path and in between two banks. And so that was like another way for me to naturalize the science fiction, like to get the science fiction into our bodies and into the like the earth, the planet, the town we live in ourselves. So that was like one of the most important things to me, is that instant connection becomes explained through the book as like absolutely natural and absolutely something that has to be lived through and earned too at the same time.
Thank you. Ebony. No, it's because of my thought after I read the story. Sorry, that's why I'm making a face. Well, some of the stories in the anthology have a happily ever after. Others, such as yours, the Black Mecca, have open endings. When did you realize you wanted your characters, Lynetta and Assad's story, to end the way it did?
I'm sorry in advance by the way you're shaking your head. So the funny thing about this, I guess like I don't know, maybe open endings is like my new brand or something. But the reason why I say that is because I had this issue with Love Radio too, where Love Radio is a young adult romance. I am generally writing in the young adult space, and this is technically my first adult story. But it's because I write young adult. I'm writing for teenagers who are coming into their adulthood. And for me, that's what being young and in love is, right? It is in a way open-ended. It's open-ended. So I think for me, when I'm writing young love or thinking about young love, I think the strongest and most realistic version of a happily ever after in my mind when I'm writing it is commitment. And so you're having this whole like moment where they're trying to the will they won't they, the what's tugging against like what's keeping them apart versus when they decide to get together. And for younger people, like actually choosing to commit when like you could be single and out there, I think is very strong. Like they're not going to get married. And so when I think about college experience and college relationships, a lot of it, like Mia was saying, like you make mistakes, things don't make sense, things aren't adding up, you're not doing everything right. But there is still when you choose to commit to that person, that is the beginning of like to me the beginning of the happily ever after, the beginning of the months or years or life of spending with each other. So I'm sorry. And but I think it's really important and special and that is like you said, it's not just my story. There are some other stories where there is, a happily ever after, but you're left wondering like what becomes of their story afterwards. And I don't know, something about that too, I think is really refreshing because it allows the reader to create their own imagination of what could be, but also being realistic about their age and like what is brought in front of them and how they're going to handle a relationship moving forward or committing to this relationship moving forward.
I'm making a note to myself to buy this anthology for my college age daughter. I'm pointing her specifically to Ebony's story.
Thank you, Ebony. Now I feel better. Erin, Ellis is a working class young man whose ancestor marooned his ship's voyagers and mistaken, causing shame and ridicule upon the family's name. Although Greer is the daughter of the wealthiest man in town, her ability to hear distant voices and sounds scares most villagers. How do their backgrounds shape their relationship?
So for a little bit of a backstory, for the plot, we are in a cursed logging town, kind of set in like 1770s Labrador, and 150 years before, there was Resolution Beaufort came, and he was going to completely revitalize or revolutionize Canadian logging industry, which was a wildly fun thing to research. So he brings all of these mill workers and loggers and their families and everything to the New World to settle in what is now present day Labrador. And it's all going to be great, but a horrible shipwreck happens, and he ends up getting the entire logging industry. All of the people he brought over on the ship are stuck in between these warding stones. Once you have spend one night in this town, you can't leave. The warding stones will bring you back. So everyone really hates this guy and all of his descendants so much that 150 years later, we still hate the Beauforts. So poor Ellis, he's a really nice guy. He's got very kind of Peter Marlark. He works at a bakery, all these things. He's a really great guy. But his last name is Beaufort. So all of the town kind of really don't trust them. Anytime anything bad happens in town, the Beauforts are blamed. And Greer, she's a Mackenzie. Her father owns the mill. They are now up and running and profiting off of Canada's natural resources. There's a whole thing on colonialism we won't get into, but she, who should have absolutely everything, and her choice of suitors in the town, because she does have this very weird quirk. She can hear over great distances. She can hear heartbeats. She can hear the whispers that the town guys are saying across the room and learning all their secrets and everything. Everyone very much looks at her as an outsider. And it was really fun to kind of play with their relationship, because these two people should have nothing at all to relate to. They come from very different walks of life. But because they both have these weird quirks that are not their faults, they're just born into who they are. They end up relating in a lot of ways that the townspeople certainly don't understand. And it was really fun to have Greer. It was kind of gave her a chance. Her father has all of these very set plans for her and who she is going to marry, and he wants her, to kind of marry the cute guy man in town and everything. And she's like, no, this is who I love. This is we understand each other. This is who my heart wants. And this is a Tam Lin retelling. And so it was really fun to write a heroine who was like, nope, this is who I love. I'm going to fight for him. I'm going to go to the ends of the earth to find and save him. But it was very fun to get to explore these two people who should not have, for any reasons, ever ended up together, but they understand each other, and the pain of growing up as an outsider kind of brought them together and lays the groundwork for their future love.
Thank you. And I want to remind the audience that if you have any questions for our speakers, please put them in a Q&A code. Next question goes to Ariel. Emmeline initially doubts herself as she navigates being courted by Colin, a member of the alum, and for her growing attraction to Hal, who is a citizen of the lowest social class, the major defects. How does she gain the confidence to follow her gut?
Yeah, it's funny because in writing this and working through it, I've never really seen Emmeline as being confident in this first, book of her story. I've always thought of her as being more brave or courageous. Throughout the novel, she makes these choices and puts a lot at risk, but she does so while very scared. She fumbles through a lot of her choices, and she doubts herself a lot. Like, she doubts her role, she doubts the alum's rules, and she doubts her feelings for both of these two men. And she's really conflicted throughout the entire series. But it doesn't stop her from making choices to move the narrative forward in her story. And I really found that to be a beautiful narrative, to be afraid, without a support system, knowing that her life and other people's lives around her could be on the line, and doing it anyway. And like, from a personal place, it was like, it's why I'm here talking to you guys. Like, I don't think I ever would have published a book if I hadn't been just willing to be scared and do it anyways, and like put myself out there. And I really wanted to bring that story to the readers, other than the idea that this confident woman goes through and gets everything she wants. Because a lot of us, as we fumble through life, we do it terrified and we figure it out anyways. So I think her confidence is going to grow in the coming books. But in this one, I think it's more of a tale of her being brave, even though she's alone and doesn't know what she's doing.
Thank you. Mia. Javi is a ball of insecurities who doesn't like being the center of attention. However, he finds himself in several humorous situations where he has to think fast and pretend that he is confident in front of people. How do these situations build his character?
So I love that you described Javi as a ball of insecurities, because that is precisely what he is. One of the things that you've got to accomplish if the character is going to have an arc and change over the course of the story is you've got to start with what's their misbelief. Kind of what is that thing about themselves, or it could be more than one, that they just don't understand about themselves or their situation. And for Javi, one of the things that he truly believes is that he's not meant to be in the limelight. And that has to do with his backstory, which I won't spoil here. But because of that, he's sort of, every action in his life is prompted by this sense of, let me be behind the scenes. And it is the thing that is freezing him up. And so he is scared to do the things that he really wants to do. And there's a scene between Mani and Javi where she says, you are the one that is holding yourself back. And that is the thing that I think we often deal with, is that sometimes the insecurity or the thing that is holding us back from being our best selves is not external. It is absolutely internal. And that is the case for Javi. And so I wanted to put him in situations where the reader knows this is a misbelief, as opposed to this is in fact what should be the case. Because if you're working towards something, which is finding himself in the place where he needs to be, where he is fully realized, you can't see that unless you understand sort of how wrong he is about himself. So I thrust him in these situations where he has to be confident, where he does figure it out, where he does feel comfortable. And, you got to make your characters a little uncomfortable if you're going to get them to the point where they're their best selves. So that was the hope with all of these situations. And also, I wanted to put him in crazy costumes, and I wanted to, there's some humor in that as well, but there's humor and growth at the same time.
Thank you. Ebony, in the story Whatever Gods May Be by Kai Harris, Drew states, the best thing about being at a HBCU is that you don't really have to find your community because it's all of us. It's like we're all cookies, but what kind of cookie are you? How does your anthology amplify this message?
Yeah, I love this metaphor that Kai put into the story. So in this story, we're actually highlighting Fisk University, and I wanted to make sure that that university was included because the book title is based off of a poem for Nikki Giovanni, and she actually, she went to Fisk University. And so in the story, we have Mare, who is a character that transferred from another school, from a PWI, and she is being forced to tap into her gifts and be front and center in a way that she didn't imagine to be. And so this is a discussion between her and Drew, who is her love interest. And so from a personal experience, one of the reasons why I loved and am glad that I went to HBCU is because I was in an environment where I didn't have to prove myself in the traditional ways in which I have to prove myself as a Black woman in society, right? I was able to just show up as myself first. And I think that allowed for me to have an easier experience, whereas I could find myself quicker because there wasn't this, you are Black, you are a woman, you are this. I was able to just kind of be myself in a very quick way. And so I feel like with HBCUs, you are able to step into this bubble that doesn't look down on your Blackness, but rather amplifies it. And then from there, you're able to find your niche groups. And so that's where I think the cookie metaphor is really great. You have the Blurs, you have the Greeks, there's the band, there are the athletes. Like, you could be working for the school newspaper, or you could be working for the radio station. There's so many pockets of people or cookies that you could find at these institutions that allows you to be able to be like yourself, and be seen in ways that you might not have felt at a PWI, at another institution. And so, yeah, that is really what I wanted to showcase in each of these stories, is that each story you're seeing like different cookies. You're seeing different love stories and different settings and the way in which they navigate love and how they have their happily ever after.
Thank you. Erin, a century earlier, the townsfolk of Mistaken began its rituals with little complaint. One such is the haunting, an elaborate game of hide and seek played every 7 years, where young women become betrothed to whichever man finds them. How have these traditions impacted their descendants and their community?
So because we are stuck between these warding stones, and in Labrador, which is not particularly populated, the founders of the town quickly realized like there's not enough women to go around, and guys, rather than just start brawls and fistfights over women, they decided to have the hunt, where it's basically hide and seek. The girls go out into the unclaimed lands, the guys find them. If they get caught, they are then married and hopefully can procreate and make the next generation of mistakens, for the town to grow and become the village that it later becomes. And I think at first it was obviously like a necessity. Like, we need people if we're going to survive. We need children. We need the next generation to come and help take on all the burden of the work that all of creating a town is. 150 years later, I think it's very much a way for the founders of the town. That there's the original 7 founding fathers, sons, many generations down the line, who are still in control of the town. And by keeping all of these traditions, it definitely helps further their agenda. Whether the rest of the townspeople know what that agenda is remains to be seen until later on in the book, and we won't spoil any of that stuff. But it does, having the town strictly kind of adhere to all of these traditions and rituals. There's also a big kind of Thanksgiving celebration to the benevolence who lives in the woods, and it might be these mysterious creatures that have all sorts of powers. Having these traditions and these rituals kind of just blindly adhered to definitely helps keep the rest of the town in kind of just this state of compliance and complicity with everything. And it's not until Greer starts to realize that all the things that the founders have said, might not be true. And one of the things being that they can't cross the town border. And then she finds out on the day of her hunt, when Ellis is supposed to come and claim her, he crosses the border after sunset. And she's like, but wait, I thought we couldn't do that. And suddenly realizes maybe all of the town's people or the founders of the town aren't necessarily have our best interest at heart. They're trying to promote their own agendas. So it just kind of gives a lot of creepy folk horror, burn the patriarchy, yay.
Thank you. Mia, Mari and Javi are polar opposites. Javi's from a working class family and purposely avoids parties. Mari has an affluent background and is a social butterfly, yet they find common ground in college. In what ways do their personalities and family histories influence each other over the years?
So I think of Mari as the go-getter. She very much knows what she wants to do in life, and she has a path. Javi less so. He's the thinker. And so I think in many ways for Javi, Mari is aspirational. And it's sort of mirrors kind of what he feels in terms of his romantic interest and his ability to be sort of good enough for her. And the interesting thing about their relationship is that it actually shifts, and their personalities shift over the years. And so when you first meet Mari, she's sort of the loosey-goosey kind of like, let's have fun, let me pull him out of the funk that he's in, or let's make him more confident and get him out there. And then later on you see very quickly that she's sort of settled into a life that looks very different from what she was or who she was in the very beginning. So there's sort of a personality shift for both of them that I think helps you kind of understand why they are where they are and why they're not their best selves. And so you have to be able to sort of see, like, what is it at the beginning? What were their personalities like, and how did they there was this instant chemistry, and you could see sort of all of the hope, and they were just on the brink of something great. And then you sort of fast forward 8 years later, and that is not what's happening at all. But there is also sort of what's going on with them internally. And that's sort of the personality, and kind of that shift is sort of how they have really evolved over the years, but not necessarily evolved in a good way. And so those personalities and kind of how they try to help each other over the years is kind of where we want to get. We want to get them to the point where they're their best selves, and they do that through kind of shifting kind of where they need to be.
Thank you. Annie, your novel includes standalone chapters featuring Trust-a-Face family and dad, but are in separate universes. How do their stories affect the main timelines?
Well, I did want to make sure that I showed that everybody's story, like everyone who's connected to each other, are affecting each other's lives all the time in different ways. And found family is something that's discussed a lot in queer romance, queer literature, and in the queer community. But I think that I wanted to show that queer found family, which like may include family members, isn't just something nice to have, but is important for survival as a queer person. And to do that, I had the opportunity in this book to show that in all of these different timelines, these individuals become connected to each other from different emotional perspectives. So for example, Tressa Faye's father, Phil, is like very much a working class Green Bay Catholic widow. Like anything that you can imagine about this kind of like man who like may be very emotionally shut down, but also very hardworking and very loyal to family, but all of those emotions are kept close to the chest. And the current timeline of the book is a source of frustration for Tressa Faye. She lost her mother early. He lost his wife. They found a way to bump along together. They found a way to be together as a family, but her primary family is her sort of found family. But then we see in other timelines that emotional arc is different for them. And then we see it come back together in sort of our main timeline, that maybe in other timelines they found a way earlier to each other, to understand each other, to like find common ground with each other, but like they still ultimately do, like in different ways, through different means, through their different relationships with different people. Because there was love between them, even if neither one of them necessarily understood each other. They did love each other and they did have each other. And so likewise for her friends, all of them are dealing with like different aspects of their own growth and their relationship to each other. Things that have been like disappointing or not working, or things that have always been strong and important. And so being able to look at those from different perspectives, if different things had happened, is a way to essentially give the reader hope that when something is important to you, it is worthwhile to persist at. It may not ever look like what you thought it would, but if it was worthwhile and important, like it will like come to some fruition. But it was like particularly important to me to explore a lot of those feelings between Tressa Faye, this queer woman, and her father, because that is like a point of a lot of like pain, growth, change, and mutual understanding between queer folks and their families, their birth families, their chosen families, all of those things. So, yeah.
Thank you. The last question I have is for Ariel. Although friendships are forbidden among Emmeline's social class, she has one with Alice at the academy and with Lo as an adult. What is the significance of these relationships to Emmeline's character growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the Elum banning friendships is closely tied to the idea that you can't miss what you've never had. And for those who conform and hold true to this rule, they don't know what they're missing. But that doesn't work for Emmeline. And even without like a real cause to rebel, even young Emmeline seeks out these friendships, and she does. She rebels against what she's supposed to do. And even after everything with Alice, she does it again with Lo. And I feel that allows the reader to see that there's this seed of defiance in Emmeline from a very early age, that you get to watch grow throughout this. And in having these friendships, Emmeline knows what's at risk and she knows what's to gain. And I feel this heightens her need for justice and her willingness to question what is forbidden, even if it scares her to. And I really see Allison Lowe as like the catalyst in her story. And while romantic love really plays a big part of this, in Conform, I think Emmeline's character growth really is propelled by platonic love for the women in her life. And her need for justice for not just herself, but for her fellow women as well. And I think that's really beautiful and just as powerful as a romantic love story.
Thank you. And now I'm gonna take questions from the audience, or we'll take questions. This one I was gonna answer like within the box, but I guess I'm gonna answer how the authors respond, because it is a common thing for selection, especially in a public library. One of the audience members wants to know, what is the level of spice in these books? Are they open door or closed door?
I can start. When Javi Mare is open door, we talk about spice and peppers, and I always hesitate to say that because somebody's 1 pepper is another person's 5 peppers. So I won't say that, but it is open door.
With mine, so this is my adult debut, so it was fun to kind of get out of the YA space. It's the most close to open door that I've ever written, but it's not full, and we get interrupted several times.
My answer is the same as Erin's. It's not. There are some stories that they don't have that at all. There are others that we go there a little bit, but yeah, it's pretty mild.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, kind of like Mia said, I don't know what everybody's spice tolerance is. But it is open door. I won't say that it's the spiciest, but it is open door.
Cosmic Love at the Multiverse Hair Salon is it is open door also. And yeah.
And I'm seeing that there aren't any other questions from the audience. But it does appear that we have only 1 minute left with each other. So I guess I'm gonna close out and thank the speakers, and thank you all the librarians and other library workers who joined us today. Next, we have 3 concurrent panels: Generations Unloaded, Celebrating Family Narratives and Traditions, Suspense and Surprises, and Star-Crossed and Star-Bound. Enjoy the rest of the day, everybody, and also get the books. They're all coming out soon. Go buy them. All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.